Hey guys. Today we are going to be talking about critical lenses and misogyny. Okay, just kidding. It's a little bit more complicated than that, but that's what we're talking about. Okay, so I'm in college right now, and this semester I am taking a film theory class. And in this class, we read this big book. Just kidding, we did not read the whole book. No. We did read several essays that are in the book, though. And one of the essays that we read that really stood out to me was an excerpt from Carol J. Clover's book, Men, Women, and Chainsaws. And here's why. So in March of 2022, I forced all of my friends to go to the movie theater with me to see Ty West's film X. The only reason I wanted to see this film is because I just love A24, so I was extremely disappointed when I hated this one. It left me feeling queasy in the bad kind of way, not like ooh, that movie was so good, I'm gonna vomit. It was just weird, and I had never seen anything like it, and I didn't understand it, and I did not like it. And then I read this essay, and I rewatched X, and oh my god, it is so good. It's so good. Okay, so in this essay, Clover talks about slasher horror films and the final girl trope in these films, and pretty much why it's problematic. Okay, to explain why this is important and how it connects to my experience with X, I need to define some things. So we are going to define slasher film, the final girl trope, the male gaze. Okay, so a slasher film is defined as a horror subgenre that involves a killer stalking and killing a group of people. Think films like Scream, Halloween, Black Christmas, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, The Shining.
Here's Johnny!
Yeah, these kinds of films usually have like that eerie, creepy, catchy theme song. Themes like drugs and premarital sex, masked killers, and most importantly, a final girl. A final girl is the female character that typically takes like the victory at the end of a slasher film.
Praise the fucking Lord.
They're typically hot, virginal, and completely masculine by the end of the movie. Clover has a really cool line about final girls. She says that final girls are an agreed upon fiction for male viewers to use as a vehicle for their sadomasochistic fantasies. I just love that. So the final girl typically carries the main storyline in the movie, and we usually are at her point of view by the end of the film because she's the hero and like the one that we're rooting for by the end of the movie. Which is super weird because she just kind of turns into another killer by the end of the movie. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Clover also mentions that our closeness to the killer wanes as our closeness to the final girl waxes. So like our typically male audience members are saying, yeah, torture the women, we love the killer, all that stuff. While by the end of the film, they start rooting for the final girl. Interesting, right? How do we go from man to loving the man to loving the woman? Yeah, that's because she's a fucking man by the end of it. So the final girl's there as this like feminist symbol of how women can win. But she's just there so the rest of the plot can happen without consequences. And the rest of the plot is extremely sexist. So something that heavily influences everything, but this specifically, is the male gaze. And the male gaze is a feminist theory that describes how women are viewed from a masculine heterosexual perspective in literature and media. So the final girl is written from the male gaze, which means all of her good feminine qualities in the beginning of the film are determined by men. So there are things like being a virgin, being hot, but also modest, avoiding the vices in the film that everybody else is partaking in, like drugs, you know. She's a perfect little girl. She's a good girl. Even though she's killing the bad guy, which is different than the bad guy killing innocent people, she's still doing exactly what he's doing. They go find a phallic object, like the one that the killer was using, and they brutally murder the killer the way that the killer brutally murdered all the other women. Like, come on. And in the essay, Clover literally says, the moment at which the final girl is effectively phallicized is the moment that the plot halts and horror ceases. So everything is fine as soon as the woman turns into a man. And not only has the final girl manned herself, but she has effectively demasculated the person who we were questioning in the first place. So we are rooting for masculine energy and the male gaze through the final girl and the killer, because the killer is all of a sudden not who we're rooting for once he's not masculine anymore. And we're like, oh, let's shift our focus to this final girl because she's the new masculine character. It's ridiculous. I would also just like to give a quick shout out to this line from the essay because I highlighted it in different colors and wrote it down in my journal because it is my favorite line in the whole essay. Clover says, it may be through the female body that the body of the audience is sensationalized, but the sensation is entirely a male affair. Yeah. Ouch. I hope that makes you feel uncomfortable. Okay, how does this connect to X? Well, X is a slasher film. Boom. Connect. Just kidding. Every character, including the final girl and the female killer, loves sex. Did I mention that in the prequel Pearl, we find out the killer was also a final girl? So a final girl survives a traumatic experience, lives her life, becomes old, and becomes a killer, and then produces another final girl. So interesting. I think Ty West is definitely a genius, and I think he definitely is involved in the discourse going on about feminist horror media and final girl tropes and the male gaze. And I think because he's involved in this discourse, he has the knowledge to create a film that not only kind of fucks with this expected stereotypical plot, but he also introduces more important conversations into his film. X, rather than focusing on gender and violence, it focuses on aging and youth and these other issues that we don't talk about because we're so busy just objectifying women and caring about sex. Yes, there's sex and there's gender and there's violence, but that's not what we're focusing on. Sex is involved because all of the characters love it, including the killer. So yes, Ty West kept sex as a part of his slasher film, but he normalized it. You know, he made it okay. You know, the killer isn't killing someone because they're not a virgin. The killer is killing someone because she can't have sex the way that they can. It's not funny. It's actually really sad. It's a little funny. It's fine. So the killer, Pearl, spoiler alert, sorry, is an old woman who just wants to be touched by her husband again because they're having a hard time getting it on because they're old. That right there is your theme. Like, aging is scary and gross, and we don't accept it as a society, which is really interesting because I think what steered me away from this film after the first time I watched it was I was grossed out watching two old people trying to get it on. And I was also grossed out during the scene where Pearl is like caressing Maxine in bed, which, yes, it's gross, But I just don't think that we would have been as grossed out if it was a dude, which is so fucked up. And I hate that I fell for it, and I am so happy that I know I am much smarter now. I do not internalize misogyny anymore, and it's not my fault that I used to. I think Ty West knew that if he replaced a male killer with an old woman, but had her kind of do the things a man would also do in this situation, it would gross people out. And I think it also calls people out on their bullshit, because it's like, why can you not see this? Why are you uncomfortable watching this but not uncomfortable watching somebody else do the exact same thing? Because you should be uncomfortable watching anybody do something like that, right? I also think that the aging and youth discussion is a lot more important than just watching men torture women for fun. And here is how I segue into critical lenses. Ty West has a feminist lens and knows what the fuck is going on. I also, after reading this essay and watching this film, have gained this feminist lens, and I am so much smarter as a film watcher, reviewer, filmmaker. The reason why critical lenses are so important is because filmmakers need to understand the conscious and subconscious influence they have on the people that are watching their films. Like, if you are going to be sexist and make a film that is sexist, the people who watch your film are going to have sexist ideas put into their mind. Don't glorify virginal, perfect women because it's dumb. X is just a great film to show how transgression of the rules can be artistic motivation. Sometimes you have to break the rules to make a better film. But in order to break these kinds of rules, you have to know that they exist. And to know that they exist means you have to join in on these discussions and this discourse, and knowledge is power, you know? I know now that I can enjoy more films because I can understand where the filmmaker is coming from, because I now know the things that these filmmakers know. I can also start making films that are conscious of these kinds of issues. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I could have missed out on a very cool film because I misunderstood it. But then once I learned more and gained a feminist lens and rewatched that film with a feminist lens, I understand it now and I love it. And Ty West is awesome. And yeah, shout out to Dr. P. He's that guy. Yeah, Merry Christmas.